It's time now for More Said with Bob Koshinski, sponsored by Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant. Today's topic is WKBW Radio's famous 1968 broadcast of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. Bob's guest is Buffalo Broadcast Hall of Fame inductee and national radio production giant, Pat Feldballe.
Welcome to More Said with yours truly, and I'm so honored today and excited because there are a few things that I enjoy talking about more than WKBW Radio's War of the Worlds. And I have with me the esteemed Pat Feldballe, member of the Broadcasters Hall of Fame, long career in radio production, and one of the handful of people who've actually discussed this with the creator of WKBW's War of the Worlds, Jeff Kaye.
Yes, sir.
At least you're one of a handful of people who are still living that have that honor.
And I'm grateful today
Yes,
for
exactly.
that distinction.
It's Halloween time of year, and I didn't want to do this the week of Halloween because I want to give people a chance to kind of absorb this because our culture has changed so that the day after Halloween, first of all, Christmas carols are on the radio. People jump they go right past Thanksgiving, right to Christmas. So I wanted people to be able to absorb the Halloween flair of this discussion. So unless you were born, well, I think many people were born after 1968. They're probably watching this, but I think many people are aware of something that WKBW Radio, 1520 on your AM dial back in the day, did with the very talented, unbelievably talented Jeff Kaye, who was then program director, and he did his version. It was a 30-year anniversary tribute to the famous Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast. And Pat, there are a few mistakes in Jeff's writing and in his creation. One of the major mistakes was in the intro and outro, they said, 30 years ago tonight. Orson Welles' broadcast was on October 30th. It was not on Halloween night.
Right.
But nerds around the world are the few that...
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. We'll let that go.
So, Pat, first of all, before we dive into radio legend, how are you? How is Pat Feldballe?
Pat's okay. Pat's finding... now I'm a grandfather, and I'm one of the old guys now in the broadcast business. So there's some changes involved, but I'm still working, and I still love the work, and I still pay attention.
And you can tell Pat's got a great voice. You've done so much radio or so much production work. You've been on national spots and
been lucky.
Yeah. Well, you were born with it, right? How much training did you have to do before you really became Pat Feldballe?
This was given to me, and I don't mean that in some spiritual way. I'd always wanted to be in radio, but I don't have the personality to be Sandy Beach or my good buddy Don Pollock, who I went to high school with.
Wow.
He and I, good old pals. He had the personality. I had the back story, the behind the scenes gift. And it found me when I was working in radio. People would leave me production orders, and I would do them, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I kept getting more. And one thing led to the other. I started my own business. I was on the air all over the world. I was never trained. As a matter of fact, I studied music. That's my secret vocation is music, and I was at, I'm trying to think, it was a community music school. And the teacher told me, because I was thinking about singing, she said, you're a phony. You got to quit putting on this voice. You got to do things the way I tell you. And I thought, really? That's what I'm going to hear from someone after I've been doing this all my life? That I'm a phony? Okay. And I didn't take a class. So
she thought you were just faking the voice.
I don't know what she thought, but she didn't like me.
Well, back in the day, there was a way for radio guys to kind of almost talk through their nose, I guess, and create this radio voice. And then you'd see them in person, and you're like, that doesn't sound like the guy on the radio. But that doesn't exist anymore. People are just themselves when they're on the air.
Well, I think that there is something to be said for the announcer quality, which I was able to bring in my own way to work. which I don't hear anymore.
Right.
And a mutual friend of ours, Bob Taylor, called me up one day and said, "Hey, why don't you get in on some AI work?" Which I decided I didn't really want to do, but he's been doing it. And so Mr. Announcer is still there, only in AI.
So you're saying they cloned the voice?
Clone the voice, yeah.
So this is
That's
the original Jeff Kaye script of the 1968 War of the Worlds. And it's amazing. First of all, it's in great condition because it's basically just sat in a folder. And this was given to me by Dan Kriegler, who was an engineer at WKBW Radio. And he was the director on that 1968 broadcast. Only the 68 broadcast. He refused to be involved in the 1971 rerun because he said Jeff edited too many good parts out. Now, I've listened to both. I can't detect much of a change, but I know that Dan, in the middle of the broadcast, and this, I did a documentary in 2018. It's available on YouTube, but Jeff kind of ticked Dan off because the phone calls to the radio station thinking that something really was happening terrible made Jeff feel that he had to go on the air and do a disclaimer, a real live disclaimer,
right?
Because many people weren't paying attention to the radio, to the commercial disclaimers that they were running, and Dan didn't want him to touch the production. He was a purist, and then Jeff threatened to take the tape off the reel-to-reel and run out onto Main Street with it.
I saw that in the first documentary you did, which I thought was really well done, Bob. And thanks for getting all that stuff in the can and making it available to people. So I'm watching this, and I'm seeing Dan and Jeff argue about this and thinking, guys, don't you have anything better to do here than not want to keep the peace in Western New York?
Right.
It just didn't make a lot of sense to me that they were having this discussion.
It just occurred to me as you were saying that, and about whether there was a panic. Maybe there are people watching that don't realize that the story is about Martian invaders crashing on Grand Island and these Martian war machines wiping out Western New York, and WKBW Radio and television's attempt to cover that story. That sounded so realistic, at least in the beginning, that many people were duped into thinking that there truly was some type of explosion on Grand Island. And I think most sane people, once they got to the part where Martian war machines were coming up out of the ground, realized that, oh yeah, this is just a Halloween play.
But it's funny that point kept being made throughout all of this, that we have run disclaimers, we have said this is a play, we do it consistently throughout this program, but people don't hear it. And what does that say about psychology and people's ability to dissect information?
What does it say about tuning out commercials?
Tuning out commercials, listening to the conspiracy theory here or there, and but wait, I just heard that there was.
Exactly.
I found that to be fascinating.
So Jeff wanted to pay homage to the Orson Welles broadcast.
Right.
So in 68, 30 years later, he wanted to do a localized version. So he writes this great script, and there's almost 30 pages.
Yeah.
Very well crafted, but once he had his newsmen and disc jockeys and television reporters attempt to do the script, he thought it sounded very phony.
Mm-hmm.
So he and Dan got together, and one of them suggested, why don't we just give them the facts and let them report on the facts and see how it goes. And the finished product, and that's why I wanted you here today, because you've done radio for so long, they were so believable, and I honestly don't know how many takes they did. You'd like to think that right off the bat, they nailed it, but I'm guessing, you trip up on a line, whatever.
Sure.
But Jeff gave them kind of an outline of what is happening. And Jeff was very careful, because if you know the original H.G. Wells story, and I know you've read the book, they stick to certain key elements, like what the Martians looked like and what the Martian war machines looked like and that type of thing. So he stuck to the facts, on important things like that, so that when the newsman started explaining what the Martian looked like crawling out of the capsule, and its skin glistened.
Those are eyes.
Right, exactly. It's right out of the book. But they're so good at it, and this broadcast that ran about it's around 75 minutes, and they ran at 11 o'clock on Halloween night, which I'm sure was intentional because you didn't want to really scare anybody. At least that's what Jeff said, and Dan didn't believe him, and I didn't believe him.
And might there not have been an audience because kids were out trick-or-treating?
Right, exactly. It was. So I go back and I look because I got to find the facts, and the original air date was on Thursday night, so it was a school night. Now, when they reran it in '71, it was a Sunday night, and they reran it again in '73 and '75, and those two versions, especially the '75 version, were so edited and torn up. Jeff Kaye wasn't even working at WKBW in '75, so they throw it to the newsroom, and suddenly Jeff's talking without any introduction. So to me, that's a bastardized version and to be discounted. But we'll get to this later. But that was the version that John Hager heard, who then became program director of 97 Rock, and kept in his mind as a great piece of work. But he'd never heard the earlier versions. In '73, well, I guess I'll get into it. So '68, Sandy Beach is the DJ.
Right.
In '71, it's Jackson Armstrong.
Right.
Who was, in my opinion, one of the greatest.
Never heard anyone speak that fast.
And not just speak fast, but well.
But yeah. He was out of control on that thing, but just beautiful.
And then in '73, it's Shane, brother Shane, who thought that the version he did in '73 was the only one that existed. But that's Shane.
That's Shane.
That's Shane. Yeah, so anyway, they do this broadcast. It's unbelievably good. It, in a sense, changed some things with the FCC because their sister station, Cap City's own station in Providence, Rhode Island, WPRO, and it was, I believe, the next year or year after that, they did their own version because they'd heard so much about it. And somehow they created a transcript off of Jeff Kaye's 1968, because if you hear their version, it is word for word like the KBW version. But that script never existed, so somebody sat down and listened to the broadcast
and transcribed the
whole thing.
Wow.
Their broadcast is nowhere near as effective as Jeff's, but they got their hands slapped by the FCC for not doing enough disclaimers and creating this impression that what was happening was real. This is all inside baseball stuff, and somebody's calling me to warn me about it. So I thought I'd turn that off. So anyway, but Pat, you've been behind a board for countless decades, right? You've done radio production. Your sense of what it took to pull off what they did 55, 57 years ago.
I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah.
Well, technologically, we were in the dark ages. But I give Jeff a tremendous amount of credit, and Dan Kriegler a tremendous amount of credit, because they knew that they couldn't just walk into a studio and do this and have it happen.
Right.
I know Jeff looked at the CBS version, had issues with copyright, different things that made him back away from that, rewrite. Once he started to write, he started to think, okay, how are we going to do this with our staff? And we got newsmen. Did a run through with it. It stunk because these guys aren't actors. They're reading. And reading and not reading,
right.
Tremendous difference, So once he got to that point, which he intelligently allowed himself the time to do, he said, okay, here's what we'll do. You guys are newsmen. I'll give you the story. You do your thing on it. It just worked so well. I have seen him, and I've seen your piece, listened to him explain how he did it. Dan, listen to him talk about it. I would like to have seen some actual take 1, take 2, take 3 type things on that to see where they stumbled, how they linked the time frames up and whatnot. But brilliantly done, brilliant. Jeff knows, or I should say, knew production. I think instinctively, and when he got these guys doing their thing, he just ran with it. And script or no script, I know that they were dealing with time frames. They were dealing with they call it in and out, intros, outros. You end here. We put a click of a microphone on your line here. These guys were paying attention to some detail, but they were pretty much living it.
One of the things they revealed to me, so there was let's put it this way, it wasn't 100% completed by Halloween 1968. So Dan Kriegler had to, in real time, live on air, run some sound effects.
Right.
But their other concern in that regard, and this is something old radio and TV people would know, they didn't want to make too many generations of the master production.
Right.
Because back in those days with analog, you lose some of the sharpness in the audio.
And I was listening to Dan go on about that. And I went to work at KB in 1980. And because I was doing a lot of freelance, they gave me a little studio to do freelancing.
Cool.
Otherwise, they had a big, beautiful room, which was very state-of-the-art at the time.
Was this the one on Delaware?
Delaware Avenue, yeah. Al Laffler was the engineer, great guy to work with. But I think I was using the full-track Ampex machines that Jeff, lamented to me about. Oh my God, these things were terrible. In that studio. So my hands were on history. But I took issue with what Dan Kriegler was saying about those generational losses. I think he gave himself a lot of extra work. But nonetheless, it worked beautifully. And the thing about KB's signal was that it was so dirty and muddy and compressed, you wouldn't have heard a generational loss.
You couldn't tell.
You couldn't tell. Another thing made me think of was back in my early days of doing voiceovers, I would work with you might have 4 talents working on a spot. You'd have the characters and the announcer and whatever. And I remember being in studios where we would all stand around a table, each at a mic. The engineer would have a record with a sound effect on it, a cart with a music bed on it, an open reel with a sound effect on it, and we'd have to do that all live in
real
60
time.
seconds. And we frequently didn't, but did most of the time. And I think that's what they were doing, and it wasn't unusual for them because that's what you did. I keep thinking about the technological differences between then and now. If you didn't know what you could do, you dealt with what you had.
Exactly.
And they were geniuses of their craft, inspired practitioners at the time. No other question. No other description for them.
Repetition is the best coach, and the guys working at WKBW Radio in 1968. I mean, across the board, we're all true professionals and people who had been,
Absolutely.
you didn't just walk into the station.
Absolutely.
At that station, 50,000 watt. And you mentioned, the signal, but the signal at night went down halfway down the eastern seaboard, which added to the effect of this, because if you're living in Maryland or North Carolina, and you can only get the station at night. And a lot of people would say, I used to tune in KB out of Buffalo at night because they love the music, right? They love the top 40 format and whatever was available in their market, especially with the personality jocks that KB had. They would gravitate towards that station in Buffalo, like some of the great stations across the country. So if they walked in minutes into or 10 minutes into this broadcast, they could be, wow, what the hell's going on in Buffalo? And, Dan gave me wire stories that were, he claimed the first time ever that, a wire story was reporting on a broadcast while it was still going on. Who knows if that's true, but and that's part of what this is. There's so much legend to this broadcast. Now, you got to be a diehard radio fan to be into this, I think. There's a part of this is a great Halloween story, and people who love Halloween. And I've had, since I started doing documentaries on this and things like that, there's been serious radio jocks who have contacted me by email, who were for the first time discovered this because it's on YouTube, and they're truly marveled at what it is. The broadcast, the 68 broadcast that I put on YouTube has over 200,000 views and listens, so I know there's people out there. And Steve Cichon put out the 1971 version, and that's got a lot of views. So the thing has legs. I mean, and that's one of the things that's incredible. It doesn't sound like it was necessarily done over 50 years ago.
No, it doesn't. It sounds very contemporary. There's nothing in it, maybe musically, with the surrounding stuff with the jocks on the air, but as far as the way it's delivered, the way it's portrayed, the news reporting, it's solid. It's kind of timeless, and for a while, you and I ran into each other out at Niagara County Community College back in the day, and I was teaching a media course, and this came up, and I met you in the line at Tim Hortons, and you gave me the piece that you had done on Dan Kriegler and Jeff, and I was in my class comparing the CBS version with the Buffalo version. And my point to the students, and I hope I can make this point, is that it doesn't matter if you were a old school radio fan, you're of a mind that if this came about as a newscast on a streaming service, should there be one, or whatever media outlet there is now, you could still be captivated by it,
right? Because
the story is well done, and again, our attention span. Wait, what? Our explosion on Grand Island? What? My mother lives on Grand Island. You're going to get right into it, and it does. I don't think the medium mattered. That's what I told my students, and I would like to think that it's like anything historic having to do with Halloween, you still enjoy it. So let yourself enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's such a good piece.
There's a kid in all of us, and I think that part of it is still...
Yeah.
It's definitely one of the reasons why I was attracted to it. I've had people had conversations with me about, well, you could never do that today. Because of social media.
I think you could with serious consequences.
I think social media would actually build it, because people would start texting. Do you hear what's going on? You know what I mean? Sure. You're not calling people. You're just wow, do you see there's explosions on Grand Island? It would take a life of its own.
Sure.
But since 9/11, unfortunately, these types of broadcasts would absolutely be frowned upon, and people would not find them entertaining. And I know that H.G. Wells, after the Orson Welles... And to me, that still blows my mind that they both had the same sounding last name. It's not spelled the same, but
right.
H.G. Wells, he didn't get it. He knew Orson Welles used his book as the formula to create his broadcast. And I should say, Orson Welles' famous broadcast starts off as a news coverage, and then it evolves into telling the story like from the book, because they were radio actors and really went into the book narration. So while Orson Welles' original absolutely did create true panic,
yes, it did,
because nothing had ever been done like that before.
Right.
People had nothing to compare it to. They really thought. The only thing that saved really huge panic, and I think just like the KB and much more with Orson Welles, much of what was written decades later was a fabrication of people are jumping out of their 10th story window to evade the Martians. None of that, from what I've read, that really never happened. People truly thought that there was, explosions and that type of thing. But H.G. Wells, he said, the British audience would have never enjoyed that because Britain has actually been invaded and bombed, and it was too real, would have been too real to the English listeners to think that this was a fun Halloween prank.
Good point.
And now we're in the same boat after 9/11.
Yep. Yeah, and it's true. I mean, I don't think it's funny in any way or even artistically warranted to talk about people falling off the Grand Island Bridge and dying. And people are dying. Jim Fagan's dead. It's just not...
Which didn't seem to bother Jeff too much in the broadcast.
No.
If Jim's been zapped, leave him alone.
Well, forget about Jim. Well, Get out of there.
And why did he kill off Jim Fagan first? Do you remember?
I do remember, because I was in NABIT, the National Association of Broadcast Engineers and Technicians, for which Jim was the...
I was a member too.
He was the shop steward. So Jeff being management and Jim being union, go away, kid, you bother me.
Killed him off first.
Yeah, killed him off first.
So it was a great broadcast. I mentioned earlier John Hager, who was a fan. And in 1989, I do a 6.5-minute piece for AM Buffalo on Channel 7 about the broadcast. And I'm so glad I did, because that's where I was able to capture Jeff Kaye, Dan Kriegler, Irv Weinstein, Jim Fagan talking about creating that broadcast.
Oh, so glad you did.
Well, they were still obviously with us.
Sure.
And so in 1998, I get a phone call from John Hager from 97 Rock. And he got a phone call from, I believe, Jim Gillen, who was an advertising
Sure, I know Jim.
Gentleman. Now, Jim Gillen had never heard the WKBW radio broadcast, had no idea that it existed.
Wow.
But he was aware of the Orson Welles broadcast, as most people were.
Sure.
And he liked the 1952-53 film War of the Worlds, where the alien, where the Martian, they were little kind of hovering flying saucers. They weren't tripod war machines. But he loved that movie. He wanted John Hager, he talked to John about redoing that on 97 Rock because it was the 40th anniversary of the Orson Welles broadcast.
Okay.
So John calls me knowing that I'm, War of the Worlds nerd. And we got together and had lunch and decided we were going to attempt to do a updated version. And they ran it on 97 Rock and they ran it on 103. And John soon found out, we all found out, just how incredibly hard it was. And that John bit off a lot more than he could chew at the time, because Jeff Kaye ended up with his employees doing, the parts, and the Channel 7 employees, Irv and a couple other reporters. The 97 version, we recruited people from literally all walks of life. We had Kevin O'Connell, we had Don Postles, we had Dennis Gorski, the county executive at the time, on and on and on. And so everybody had to be brought into the studio and read their parts. And that was problematic for the same reasons that Jeff found out in 1968. Most of the people doing this were not actors. It was very cumbersome. And the poor guy who was the production guy, and I think now he's still doing production at WEC Radio, if I can remember his name, he was still editing the night of the broadcast. And so I'm listening at home. I had done my part. I was... The general manager from Empire Sports is now reporting on the Martian war invasion at 97 Rock.
Absolutely.
We all pitched in. We got our good friend Dennis DiPaolo at DiPaolo's to simulate a Halloween party, and that was where Larry Norton and Rob Lederman did their parts from, and we were over ambitious. So anyway, the broadcast is on the air, and they're still editing it together. So at the end of the broadcast, Irv Weinstein is the last remaining guy alive, and then he gets zapped, and then you're supposed to hear the Martian war machine sound and fade out, and then the closing narration.
Right.
And I'm home listening, and the Martian war machine sound is running, and it's running, and it's running, and I'm like, I don't remember John saying this was going to run that long for effect. It ran, I think, it sounded like it ran for 5 minutes.
Wow.
What happened was he didn't have the closing reel queued up. He was just completing it. So he had to just let it, otherwise it was dead air. And John said the next day, one of his on-air persons came in and said, that was unbelievable that was so real. Had no idea it was a mistake. It was so real, like it was really the end of the world, And so anyway, but that night, there were two versions running on 97 Rock and 103. There was the original version running on WNUC, which is 107.7. It was country at the time. And WWKB Radio ran the 1971 version at the same night. So there were 5 versions of the story running all in the same market on the same night, which has to be a record somewhere.
In the same time frame?
Yeah.
Wow.
All on Halloween night.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I'd like to think that first one could stand the test of time, and we could showcase that, like the Wizard of Oz. You don't
exactly
redo it necessarily. It was so good, and classic performances by all the people involved.
So when did you ever get to discuss this with Jeff? Do you remember?
Well, I was teaching, and I was. It might have been around Halloween. Could have been very well. Could have been that time of year in school terms. And I just called him. I just called him up and said, hey, can we talk about this? And he was real happy to do it. I don't have a tremendously long conversation with him, or my original was edited, and I don't know where the original is now. But, he was happy to talk about it and very enthusiastic.
He one of the cool things about the 97 Rock version was I did a phoner with Jeff as part of the broadcast. We had Jeff working in Rochester.
Aha.
And in the original, Jeff is on the air with Irv Weinstein in the middle of, it's right towards the end, and all hell's breaking loose. And Jeff says, Irv, I've been looking for a match for this cigarette. You know where I can get a match? And then Irv says, oh, you got real problems, sarcastically, like, the world's coming to an end and you can't light your cigarette. So when we got him on the phoner for the 97 Rock version, we asked him if we could kind of recreate that. And he says, well, I quit smoking because, he went through a very serious
sure he did, yeah.
Throat cancer situation. He says, I haven't smoked in years, so let's change it around. So I said, is there anything else we can do for you, Jeff? And he said, well, if you could rustle up a steak and fries, I'd be happy. And that was fine. I was just like a little kid, so excited to be able to play radio with him and do this. In the early 2000s, I had the honor of inducting him into the Buffalo Broadcasters Hall of Fame. And of course, I went at length about his creation of War of the Worlds. And then when he came out, he said, I'd like to think I was remembered for something more other than just that War of the Worlds broadcast, because he was the voice of NFL Films for quite a while.
Sure he was.
He was a very talented broadcaster, but to me, he was one of the most creative guys ever to work in this market.
Oh, I agree. I didn't have what it took to be an air personality under him, but he was I would call him a friend. We weren't best buddies. We didn't go golfing or anything, but I asked him one time when I was thinking about going out on my own, leaving radio. I said, Jeff, need your advice. What do you think about being a freelancer? He was at BEN at the time, and he said, no, we got an opening for a production guy over here, and you should take it. That's a career move. You got to do that. Well, I didn't. And I don't know whether it was a month later, 6 months later, whatever it was, he left to freelance at NFL Films. And I thought, you didn't tell me.
Right.
I've always loved that about that conversation, was that he was telling me I should get a good job, son, like your father. And then he jumps off.
I'm going to, first of all, I got to wrap this up, which means I'll go another 10 minutes. Real quick, this is something, and I really should sit down one day and do something on this, but it always intrigued me, and maybe you have some insight. Why did radio jocks hop around so much? Why did they go from market to market to market? Yes, some were fired, some was out of necessity, but like Jackson Armstrong, he could have stayed at KB Radio for probably as long as he wanted until they changed the format.
Change the format,
But,
sure.
I mean, Joey Reynolds always said, well, it's like actors. You do a movie and then you move on. I think Joey got fired a couple of times along the way.
He might have.
Have any insight to that?
Well, I was given offers to go to a couple of cities in Ohio at one point. I could have been in Colorado, a couple of different places. I even was told I could work at Chum in Toronto.
Oh, cool.
But to do that, you had to work in the whole ownership group, which was Trans-Canada. So you might be in Winnipeg or some small town in Canada before you got to Toronto. So no, I don't want to do that. I guess you just look at it and you think, well, it's got to be better over there. Why not? Let's try it. I never took anybody up on the offer, so I really can't say.
So you think a lot of it too had to do with just other markets trying to grab guys out who they thought were talented, and we need you here?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of thoughtless, if you will, in terms of career choice, job choice, behavior. But we all knew a lot of people. Look at Tommy Shannon. He worked all over the place. And then wound up coming back here. It was great.
And one of the oddities, I guess, in a sense, is Danny Neverth, who stayed and remained in Buffalo, and had plenty of offers to go elsewhere.
Yeah, and could have, I thought. Yeah. Danny had everything going.
Yeah. Well, it's one of my favorite tunes, Harry Chapin, WOLD, which captured it beautifully. So, well, I really am going to wrap this up, Pat. I want to thank you so much for coming out. And it's always great to sit down and talk radio with you. Well, I hope I had something to offer. I appreciate your asking. Well, if you didn't, I'll edit it out. You know how that goes. You can have that really short podcast this week. Yeah. Well, this was fun. And I continue to support your support for War of the Worlds. I think what you've done to memorialize it, to analyze it, to gather and create an archive of the backstory along with the front story is truly great work. You've done a great job with it. My family, I have 3 sons I'm very proud of. They are honestly tired of hearing about it. My beautiful wife, Mary, upon my creation of a documentary that took me 6 months, said, as I think many wives would, why couldn't you have gotten into something that would have made money? And my answer was, well, you got to go where your heart takes you, right? Well, it's funny. When I started in radio a long time ago, I started as a volunteer at WBFO, and I never thought about money. And one day they came up to me and said, we've got a financial line for you. We're going to give you some money. How much? $16 a week. Oh. It didn't matter. I was doing what I honestly was doing what I loved. Absolutely. And I didn't have a family at the time that I was supporting anyway. I loved it. So I'm sorry, but I must tell your wife that you did what you had to do. I'll rerun this clip for her. Thank you so much, Pat. That's going to do it, everybody. I hope this puts you a little bit in the Halloween spirit. Have fun with the holiday. If you get a chance, go to YouTube, listen to the actual broadcast. Definitely do that. Definitely do that. Have yourselves a great night and a much better tomorrow.